Christmas morning, I unwrapped my gift and froze. It was the exact watch I gave my dad last year. He didn't even remember. Everyone kept opening theirs. I put the box down and quietly left. A week later, Mom asked why I seemed off. My name's Josh, I'm 29, and I need to tell you about the Christmas that basically unraveled my entire understanding of where I stand in my own family. I know that sounds dramatic. Stick with me. It gets worse before it gets better, and honestly, looking back on it now, I wouldn't change a thing. But we'll get there. Let me give you some background first. I grew up in a suburb outside of Richmond, Virginia. Nice enough neighborhood, the kind where everyone has a riding mower they use exactly twice a year and a garage full of stuff they swear they're going to organize this weekend. My parents are Walt and Diane. Dad's a retired operations manager. Mom's a semi-retired real estate agent who still takes the occasional listing because she says it keeps her sharp. They've been married 34 years. My older brother is Sutton. He's 33, lives about 40 minutes from our parents with his wife Margot and their 2 kids, Benji and Clara. And then there's me, the second kid, the one who was always just kind of there. Now look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you my childhood was miserable, because it wasn't. I had food, clothes, a roof over my head, parents who technically showed up. But there's a difference between being present and being seen, and I figured that out early. Sutton was the golden child, valedictorian, captain of the lacrosse team, got into UVA on a partial scholarship, and you would have thought he cured a disease the way my parents talked about it. Every holiday, every family dinner, every random Tuesday phone call, the conversation always orbited around Sutton. What Sutton was doing at work, how Sutton's kids were in the 98th percentile for height, how Margot made the most incredible beef Wellington last Sunday. It was like living inside a newsletter about someone else's life. Me? I went to community college, transferred to a state school, got a degree in information systems, and landed a solid job doing IT infrastructure for a mid-sized logistics company. Not glamorous, but I'm good at it. I make decent money, and I actually like my work. But in my family's eyes, I might as well have been folding towels at a laundromat. Not because they ever said anything cruel outright. It was just this constant low hum of indifference. Like I was furniture. Comfortable. Functional. Not worth commenting on. I started noticing it more as I got older. At Thanksgiving, Mom would spend 20 minutes asking Sutton about his latest project at the consulting firm, then turn to me and say, "And how are you, sweetie?" With this tone that felt like she was checking a box. Dad was worse in a different way. He just didn't ask at all. We'd sit in the same room watching football, and the most I'd get was a nod and a hand me the remote. I told myself it was just how dads are. Some guys aren't talkers. Some guys show love by being in the room. I believed that for a long time. The Christmas thing had actually been building for years without me realizing it. Every year, I put real thought into gifts for my family. I'm talking research, planning, the whole deal. For Mom one year, I found a first edition copy of her favorite cookbook from the 70s, the one she said her own mother used to cook from. She hugged me, said it was sweet, and I saw it on a shelf in the guest room 3 months later, still in the tissue paper. For Sutton and Margot, I got a weekend reservation at this vineyard they'd been talking about. They went, had a great time, and never mentioned it again. But the gift for Dad is where this story really starts. Last Christmas, the one before the incident, I spent weeks finding the perfect watch for my father. Not some crazy luxury brand, but a really nice automatic with a leather strap, engraved on the back with his initials and the year he retired. It cost me about $600, which for my budget at the time was significant. I wrapped it myself, wrote a card about how much I admired his work ethic and how he taught me the value of showing up every day. Real stuff, from the heart. He opened it Christmas morning, looked at it, said, "Oh, that's sharp. Thanks, bud," and set it aside to watch Benji rip open a toy truck. I didn't see him wear it once in the next 12 months. Not once. But I told myself maybe he was saving it for special occasions. Maybe he didn't want to scratch it. People do that with nice things, right? Fast forward to this past Christmas. The whole family at Mom and Dad's house, same as always. The tree was up, Bing Crosby was playing from a speaker that Dad still doesn't know how to connect to Wi-Fi, and Margot had brought some kind of fig and goat cheese appetizer that everyone acted like was a revelation of modern cuisine. I showed up with my gifts, including a really nice bottle of bourbon for Dad this year and a handmade ornament kit I'd put together for the kids. We sat around the tree and started opening presents. Sutton got a new Patagonia jacket from Mom and Dad. Margot got a gift card to some spa. The kids were buried in wrapping paper. Standard stuff. Then Mom handed me a box and said, "This one's from Dad." I smiled and opened it, and I froze. It was a watch. A really nice automatic with a leather strap, with my father's initials engraved on the back and the year he retired. It was the exact watch I had given him the year before. My dad had regifted my Christmas present back to me. He didn't even remember I was the one who gave it to him. I sat there staring at it while the room buzzed with wrapping paper and laughter around me. Nobody noticed. Nobody saw me turn the watch over and read the engraving I had personally picked out 12 months ago. Nobody saw me close the box and set it quietly on the arm of the couch. My chest felt like someone had poured concrete into it. I couldn't breathe right, but I also couldn't make a scene because that's not what I do. That's never been what I do. I'm the easy one, the one who doesn't cause problems. I waited about 10 minutes, then stood up and said I needed to grab something from my car. I walked out the front door, got in my truck, and just sat there. The engine was off. The windows were fogging up. I could see the glow of the Christmas tree through the living room window, and I could hear muffled laughter from inside. My family was in there having a great time, and not one of them noticed I was gone. I sat in that truck for almost 20 minutes before I started the engine and drove home. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't text. I just left. And here's the part that still gets me. It was almost 3 hours before anyone reached out. And it wasn't a call. It was a text from Mom that said, "Did you leave? Thought you were staying for dinner." That was it. No concern. No, is everything okay? Just a logistical question about a seat at the table. I typed back, "Yeah, wasn't feeling great. Merry Christmas." And that was the end of my Christmas day. A week went by, a full week. And then Mom called me on New Year's Day and asked, in this casual, almost breezy tone, "Hey, you've seemed a little off lately. Everything okay?" Off. That was the word she used. Like I was a thermostat that needed adjusting. And something in me just snapped. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a yelling way. In a quiet, deeply tired way. Because I realized I had spent 29 years performing for an audience that wasn't watching. And I was done. What I said to my mom on that call, and what happened after, is something I still think about every single day. So there I was, on New Year's Day, standing in my kitchen holding the phone while my mom asked me why I'd been off. I had a choice. I could do what I'd always done, which was swallow it, say I was fine, and go on being invisible. Or I could tell the truth. And honestly, I was so tired that the truth just came out before I could stop it. I said, "Mom, Dad gave me back the watch I gave him last Christmas. The one I had engraved. He didn't even know it was from me." There was a pause. A long one. And then she said, "Oh, honey, I'm sure that was just a mix-up. You know how your father is. He probably just grabbed the wrong box." The wrong box. As if there were dozens of engraved watches floating around their house. As if it was perfectly normal for someone to not recognize a gift their own son gave them 12 months ago. But what really got me wasn't the excuse. It was how fast she made it. She didn't ask me how I felt. She didn't say she was sorry. Her first instinct was to protect Dad from looking bad. I took a breath and said, "It wasn't a mix-up, Mom. He never wore it. He never even opened the box after Christmas morning. He forgot I gave it to him because it didn't matter to him. Because I don't matter to him. Not the way Sutton does." And that's when the conversation went exactly where I knew it would go. She got defensive. She told me I was being dramatic. She said they love both their boys equally and that I was reading too much into a simple mistake. She brought up the time they came to my college graduation, as if showing up to a ceremony that lasted 2 hours was proof of decades of equal treatment. She said, "Your father is proud of you, Josh. He just shows it differently." Differently. That's a nice word for not at all. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just said, "Okay, Mom, I hear you." And I hung up. That was January 1st. By January 3rd, I got a call from Sutton. Now, Sutton and I aren't enemies. We're not close either. We're the kind of brothers who text "Happy Birthday" and maybe see each other 5 or 6 times a year at family stuff. He's not a bad guy, but he's never once in his life had to wonder if our parents cared about him. So he's got this blind spot the size of a parking garage when it comes to understanding what I've been dealing with. He called to tell me that Mom was upset, that she felt like I was being unfair to Dad. He said, "Josh, come on, man. Dad's 67. He forgets stuff. It's not that deep." I said, "Sutton, he gave me back my own gift. A gift I spent $600 on. A gift I had engraved with his initials. And he had no idea. Sutton got quiet for a second, then said, "Okay, yeah, that's not great. But you know how he is. He's not a sentimental guy. He cried when you got promoted last year." I said, "Silence." A long one this time, because he knew I was right. Dad had literally gotten choked up at Thanksgiving dinner when Sutton announced his promotion to senior partner. Pulled him into a hug, said he was proud, the whole deal. Meanwhile, when I told them I'd been promoted to lead systems architect 6 months earlier, Dad had nodded and said, "Good for you, bud," and gone back to carving the turkey. Sutton said, "I don't know what you want me to say, man. I don't want you to say anything," I told him. "I just want you to stop pretending this isn't happening." He didn't call me back after that. Not for a while. Here's where it gets really heavy. About 2 weeks later, mid-January, Mom invited me to Sunday dinner. She said she wanted the whole family together, said it had been too long. I almost said no, but some stupid hopeful part of me thought maybe this was her way of addressing things. Maybe she'd talk to Dad. Maybe they'd realize something. I showed up. Margot had made lasagna. The kids were running around. Dad was in his recliner watching a basketball game. Everything was exactly normal, which should have been my first clue. We sat down to eat, and about halfway through dinner, Mom cleared her throat and said, "So, Josh, your father and I talked, and we want you to know that we're sorry about the gift situation. It was an honest mistake, and we hope you can move past it." That was it. That was the big reconciliation. A scripted apology that sounded like it was drafted by a corporate HR department. And Dad didn't even deliver it himself. He sat there eating garlic bread like he was watching someone else's meeting. I looked at him and said, "Dad, do you even know what the gift was?" He looked up, chewed, swallowed, and said, "It was a watch, right? A nice one. It was a watch I had engraved with your initials and your retirement year." I said, "I wrote you a card about how much your work ethic meant to me. Do you remember the card?" He stared at me for a second and then said, "Josh, I appreciate everything you do. Let's not make this a whole thing. Let's not make this a whole thing." That sentence. I will carry that sentence with me for the rest of my life. Because in 7 words, my father told me exactly where I stood. My feelings, my hurt, my entire experience of being overlooked for 29 years was, to him, a whole thing. An inconvenience. A disruption to his Sunday dinner. I looked around the table. Mom was staring at her plate. Sutton was looking at his phone. Margot was cutting lasagna into tiny pieces for Clara. Nobody was going to say anything. Nobody was going to stand up for me. Nobody was even going to acknowledge that what just happened was not okay. So I stood up. I put my napkin on the table, and I said, very calmly, "I think I'm going to head out." Mom said, "Josh, sit down. You're overreacting." And that word, overreacting, was the last straw. Because I had spent my entire life underreacting. I had spent decades swallowing every slight, excusing every moment of being overlooked, telling myself it was fine, it was normal, dads are just like that, families are just like that. And the one time I tried to say this hurt me, I was the one making things difficult. I said, "I'm not overreacting, Mom. I'm reacting for the first time, and I think that's what's scaring you." I drove home that night with the windows down even though it was January and freezing outside. I needed the cold. I needed to feel something that wasn't the numb disappointment of being invisible to the people who were supposed to see me first. I pulled into my apartment parking lot and just sat there again, engine running, heat off, breath coming out in little clouds. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sutton. It said, "That was kind of intense, man. Mom's really upset." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I hear you." Just, "Mom's really upset." Because even in that moment, the concern was for someone else. The priority was someone else's feelings. Mine were just the inconvenient byproduct of finally telling the truth. I didn't respond. I went inside, made a cup of coffee, and sat at my kitchen table until 2 in the morning, staring at the wall and thinking about what the heck I was supposed to do with all of this. Because the thing about finally seeing clearly is that you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending the house isn't on fire once you've smelled the smoke. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight with my family. I wasn't going to scream or send long emotional texts or demand apologies that would never come. I was going to do something that scared me way more than any confrontation ever could. I was going to stop trying. I was going to stop performing. I was going to stop being the one who called, the one who showed up early, the one who remembered everyone's preferences and allergies and anniversaries. I was going to step back and see if anyone even noticed the silence. And let me tell you something. What happened next broke my heart and rebuilt it at the same time. So I stopped. I stopped calling. I stopped texting. I stopped being the first one to reach out, the one who organized, the one who made sure everyone felt included. I just went quiet. And I want to tell you that it was empowering and liberating and all those things people say when they finally set a boundary. But the truth is, for the first few weeks, it was the loneliest I've ever felt in my life. January turned into February, and my phone was quiet, not silent, because I still had work emails and a group chat with my college buddies. But from my family, nothing. Mom texted once on January 19th to ask if I knew where she put her slow cooker lid. I told her to check the cabinet above the fridge. She said thanks with a smiley face. That was it for 3 weeks. Dad didn't reach out at all. Not a call, not a text, not even one of those forwarded memes he sends Sutton. I know he sends them because Sutton used to show me. I used to tell myself it was because Dad wasn't tech savvy, but the man has an iPad and a Facebook account. He just didn't think to include me. Sutton texted me once in early February. It said, "Hey, you good?" 2 words and a question mark. I replied, "Yep." He hearted the message. End of conversation. I want to be honest with you about what that silence did to me. I started second-guessing everything. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the watch thing really was just a mistake. Maybe I was being selfish and immature, and I was going to wreck my family over a piece of jewelry. I had nights where I sat on my couch staring at nothing, running the same loop in my head. Did I blow this out of proportion? Am I the problem? Is this what it feels like to be the difficult one? But then I'd remember Dad's face at that dinner table. The way he said, "Let's not make this a whole thing." The way Mom jumped to minimize it before I even finished a sentence. The way Sutton's only concern was that Mom was upset. And I'd realized that no, I wasn't the problem. The problem was a family that had been comfortable ignoring me for so long that my pain was an interruption. The lowest point came in late February. It was a Saturday night, and I was in my apartment eating cereal for dinner because I couldn't be bothered to cook. My buddy Riggins called me. Riggins and I have been friends since freshman year of college. He's the kind of guy who would drive 4 hours to help you move a couch and then refuse to let you buy him dinner. Real one. He could tell something was off, and when Riggins asks you what's wrong, he doesn't accept, "I'm fine." He just waits. So I told him everything. The watch, the dinner, the silence, all of it. He was quiet for a minute, and then he said, "Josh, when's the last time you did something just for yourself? Not for work, not for your family, not for anybody else. Just for you." I couldn't answer him. I literally could not think of the last time. He said, "That's your problem, man. You've been pouring into people who don't pour back, and now you're empty. You gotta fill your own cup." It sounds like a motivational poster, I know. But sometimes the truth is simple. I had spent so much energy trying to earn my family's attention that I'd forgotten to build a life that didn't depend on it. So that's what I started doing. I signed up for a woodworking class at a community workshop near my apartment. I'd always been interested in building things, working with my hands, but I never made time for it because weekends were usually reserved for family stuff. The class was on Saturday mornings, taught by this retired carpenter named Deacon who looked like he'd been carved out of oak himself. The guy had forearms like tree trunks and a voice like gravel, but he was the most patient teacher I'd ever had. He'd stand behind you while you were trying to cut a dovetail joint and say, "Slow down, son. The wood's not going anywhere." Something about that steadiness grounded me. I started looking forward to Saturday mornings more than anything else in my week. In March, something else happened that I wasn't expecting. I met someone. Her name was Tully, short for Tallulah, which she hated, so don't call her that. She was a project manager at a civil engineering firm, and I met her at a friend's birthday thing at this rooftop bar downtown. She was standing by the railing arguing with someone about whether a hot dog was a sandwich, and she was winning. I liked her immediately. Tully was different from anyone I'd dated before. She was direct, not rude, just honest in a way that felt like fresh air after years of living in a family where nobody said what they meant. On our third date, I told her about the watch. I didn't plan to. It just came up because she asked about my family, and I got quiet, and like Riggins, she didn't let me off the hook. When I finished telling her, she looked at me and said, "Josh, that's not a mix-up. That's someone telling you where you rank without using words." Nobody had ever put it that plainly. And hearing someone else validate what I'd been feeling made something shift inside me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being dramatic. I was a person who had been quietly devalued by the people who were supposed to value him most, and I had every right to step back. Spring came, and I started hitting my stride. Work was going well. I'd been leading a major server migration project that my boss, a sharp woman named Harlan who ran the department like a well-oiled machine, had trusted me to own completely. When we delivered it 2 weeks ahead of schedule, she pulled me aside and said, "You know, Josh, you're the kind of guy who makes everyone around him better. I don't think you hear that enough." I almost lost it right there in the server room. I was spending weekends building things. Deacon had me working on an end table that was actually starting to look like furniture and not a crime scene. Tully and I were seeing each other regularly, and it was easy in a way that relationships hadn't been for me before. She didn't need me to perform. She didn't need me to be impressive or extraordinary. She just liked me. Regular, cereal for dinner, drives a truck with Thint in the bumper me. And here's the thing that surprised me most. The less I chased my family's approval, the more I realized how much energy it had been costing me. It was like I'd been carrying a backpack full of rocks for 29 years and finally set it down. I could breathe. I could think about what I wanted instead of what would make my parents notice me. I started sleeping better. I started laughing more. Riggins said I seemed lighter, and he was right. By April, I hadn't seen my family in 3 months. Mom had called twice, both times to ask logistical questions. Once about a password for the streaming service I'd set up for them. Once about whether I was coming to Easter. I said no to Easter. She said, "Oh, okay. Well, we'll miss you." And that was it. No follow-up. No, why not? No, is something wrong? Just okay. Dad still hadn't called. I'd be lying if I said that didn't hurt. It did. Every single time I checked my phone and saw nothing from him. It was like a tiny paper cut. But paper cuts heal. And I was building something now. A life that was mine. A life where I was seen and valued and enough. Not because I earned it with engraved watches and thoughtful cards, but just because I showed up as myself. I was standing in Deacon's workshop on a Saturday in late April, sanding the legs of my end table, when my phone rang. It was Sutton, and the tone of his voice told me immediately that something had changed. He said, "Josh, we need to talk. Mom and Dad's anniversary is in June, and they want to do a big party. The whole family. And they want you there." I put down the sandpaper and said, "They want me there, or they need me there because it would look weird if I wasn't." Sutton didn't answer right away. And in that pause, I knew exactly what was happening. My family hadn't suddenly realized they missed me. They'd realized other people might notice I was missing. And that was a very different thing. What I decided to do about that anniversary party is something I planned very carefully, and it changed everything. After Sutton's call, I didn't respond right away. I told him I'd think about it and let him know. He said, "Come on, Josh, don't make this weird." Which was rich, considering I wasn't the one who made it weird. I was just the first one to stop pretending it was normal. I went home that night and sat at my kitchen table with a beer and thought about it. The anniversary party was for my parents' 35th. Mom had apparently been planning it for months. Big backyard thing at their house, catered, extended family, neighbors, the whole production. It was exactly the kind of event where appearances mattered, and my absence would generate questions that my family did not want to answer. I called Tully. By this point, we'd been together for about 2 months, and she'd become the person I talked to about everything. Not because I was dumping on her, but because she had this way of listening that made me feel like my thoughts actually had weight. I told her about the party, and she said, "What do you want to do? Not what you think you should do. What do you want?" I said, honestly, part of me wants to go and be the bigger person, and part of me wants to stay home and let them explain my empty chair. She said, "Those are both valid. But which one are you going to respect yourself for in 5 years?" That question sat with me for days. Because the thing is, I didn't want to be petty. I didn't want to punish my parents by disappearing from their anniversary party. That wasn't who I was. But I also couldn't walk in there and play the role of Happy Josh, the easygoing second son who's just thrilled to be included. That version of me was retired. I talked to Riggins about it over lunch the following week. He had a different perspective. "Go," he said, with his mouth full of a sandwich. "But go on your terms. Don't go as the kid who's been overlooked. Go as the man who knows his worth. There's a difference." "What does that look like?" I asked. He shrugged. "It looks like you walking in there with your head up, being polite, being present, but not performing. You don't need to give a speech or make a scene. Just be yourself. If they can't see you when you're standing right in front of them, that's their problem, not yours." Riggins should write fortune cookies. The man has a gift. I decided to go, but I also decided to do something I'd been putting off for months. I was going to write a letter. Not a long, dramatic manifesto. Not a list of grievances. Just an honest, clear letter to my parents explaining how I'd felt and why I'd pulled back. I wanted them to have it in writing because every time I tried to say these things out loud, they got minimized or deflected or turned into Josh is being dramatic. A letter couldn't be interrupted. I spent a week writing it. I'd work on it after dinner, sitting at the end table I'd built in Deacon's workshop, which was now in my living room, and looked surprisingly good. I wrote and rewrote and edited until every sentence said exactly what I meant. No exaggeration, no accusations, just the truth. I wrote about growing up feeling like an afterthought, about watching Sutton get celebrated for things that I also achieved but nobody noticed, about the watch and what it meant to me, and how it felt to open that box on Christmas morning and realize my own father didn't remember who gave it to him. I wrote about the dinner where Dad said, "Let's not make this a whole thing," and how those 7 words told me everything I needed to know about how seriously my feelings were taken. I wrote about the silence after I pulled back, and how it confirmed what I'd always feared, that my presence was noticed about as much as a background app on their phone. But I also wrote about what I was building. My job, my workshop, my relationship, my friendships. I wrote that I wasn't angry. I was just clear. And clarity meant I couldn't keep showing up to a dynamic that didn't serve me and pretending it was fine. I ended the letter by saying I'd be at the anniversary party because I loved them, but that things were going to be different going forward. I wasn't going to chase them anymore. I wasn't going to be the one who called first, showed up early, or pretended everything was fine when it wasn't. If they wanted a relationship with me, they were going to have to build one. A real one. Not one where I did all the work and they collected the benefits. I put the letter in an envelope and planned to give it to them after the party. Not during. I wasn't trying to make a scene. I just wanted them to read it when they were alone, in their own time, without an audience or a chance to deflect. The party was set for the second Saturday in June. In the weeks leading up to it, I focused on work, on Qley, on finishing a new project in the workshop, a bookshelf this time, more ambitious than the end table, but Deacon said I was ready. I felt steady, grounded in a way I hadn't felt in years. Whatever happened at that party, I knew who I was. And for the first time, that was enough. Qley agreed to come with me. She'd never met my family, and I was honest with her about what to expect. I said, "They're not bad people. They're just not good at seeing me. So if it feels like I'm a background character at my own family's party, that's because I have been for most of my life." She looked at me and said, "You're nobody's background character, Josh." And then she kissed me and told me to stop being so dramatic, which made me laugh because she was the only person who could say that word to me without it stinging. The morning of the party, I put on a nice shirt, loaded the bookshelf I'd built into my truck as an anniversary gift, and picked up Qley. On the drive over, I was calm. Not numb, not bracing for impact. Just calm. Like I'd already made peace with whatever was going to happen because the outcome didn't determine my value anymore. We pulled up to my parents' house around noon. The yard was decorated, tables set up, string lights hung between the trees. Mom had gone all out. There were maybe 40, 50 people milling around. Extended family I hadn't seen in years, neighbors, some of my parents' friends from church. It looked beautiful, I'll give her that. Sutton spotted me first. He walked over with a beer in his hand and said, "Hey man, glad you came." He looked at Qley and extended his hand. "I'm Sutton, the brother." Qley shook his hand and said, "I've heard a lot about you." The way she said it, perfectly neutral, made me love her a little more. I carried the bookshelf around back and found Mom near the caterer's table adjusting napkin placements like the fate of the free world depended on symmetry. She turned around, saw me, and her eyes went wide. "Josh, you came." She hugged me, and it was a real hug, not a sidearm pat. Then she saw the bookshelf. "What is that?" she asked. "I built it," I said, "in a woodworking class I've been taking. Happy anniversary." She stared at it, ran her hand along the edge. Then she said, "You built this? Yourself?" "Every piece," I said. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Something between surprise and something deeper, like she was seeing me for the first time and realizing I'd been standing there all along. She said, "Josh, this is beautiful." But that moment was cut short because Aunt Cordelia came over and started asking about the caterer, and Mom was pulled away. Qley squeezed my hand. Dad was across the yard, near the grill, talking to a neighbor. I watched him for a minute. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller, somehow. When he saw me, he nodded. Just a nod. Same as always. I nodded back. The party went on. People ate. People laughed. Sutton gave a toast that was charming and articulate and made everyone cry. I stood in the back and watched my family perform their roles perfectly. But something was different this time. I wasn't trying to squeeze into the picture. I wasn't angling for a mention or a moment. I was just there, present but not performing. And for the first time, I felt something unexpected. I felt free. What happened after Sutton's toast, though, I did not see coming. Not even close. After Sutton's toast, people clapped, glasses clinked, and Mom was dabbing her eyes. Then Uncle Hank, my dad's brother, who's perpetually 3 beers deep and has zero filter, stood up and said, "All right, enough from the favorite son. Let's hear from the other one. Josh, get up here." I froze. Tully gave me a look that said, "You don't have to," and also, "But you could." Every eye turned to me. I hadn't planned on saying anything. But Uncle Hank was already clapping. Others joined in. And suddenly, I was walking toward the front with nothing prepared and a heartbeat that could have powered a small city. I stood next to the table where my parents were sitting. Dad was looking at me with his usual unreadable expression. Mom had her hands clasped together like she was praying I wouldn't say something that would require damage control later. I looked out at the crowd and said, "I'm not really a speech guy, so I'll keep this short. Mom, Dad, 35 years is a long time. That's more than most people manage, and it means something. I know I'm not the son who gives the big toasts." I looked at Sutton. That's his department. But I want to say something that I've been carrying around for a while. The yard went quiet. Even the kids stopped running. When I was a kid, I said, I used to watch Dad come home from work every night at the same time. 5:45. He'd hang his jacket on the same hook, wash his hands at the kitchen sink, and sit down at the table. Every single day. And I thought, that's what commitment looks like. That's what it means to show up. Dad was watching me now. Really watching. Not the half glance, not the nod. Full attention. I spent a lot of my life trying to be someone worth showing up for, I said. And I'm not going to stand here and pretend that always went the way I wanted it to. But I will say this. The best thing I ever learned from this family is that showing up matters. Even when it's hard. Even when you're not sure anyone notices. I looked at Dad. So happy anniversary. I'm glad you both kept showing up. And I hope going forward, we all get a little better at it. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. I walked back to where Tully was standing, and she took my hand and said, "That was perfect." And it was. Not because it was eloquent or dramatic or devastating. It was perfect because it was honest. And because for the first time, I'd said what I meant in front of my family without apologizing for it. The party continued. People went back to eating and laughing. But something had shifted. I could feel it. Mom kept looking over at me with this expression that I can only describe as unsettled, like she'd just realized the furniture had been rearranged, and she couldn't figure out when it happened. And then, about an hour later, something happened that I genuinely did not expect. Dad came and found me. I was standing by the fence with Tully, talking to my cousin Waverly about her new nursing program. Dad walked up, hands in his pockets, and said, "Josh, can I talk to you for a minute?" Tully gave my arm a squeeze and stepped away. Dad and I walked around the side of the house to the driveway, away from the party. He leaned against his truck and didn't say anything for about 30 seconds. Just stood there, looking at the ground. Then he said, "I didn't know about the watch." I said, "I know, Dad." He said, "No. I mean, I didn't know until your mother told me in January. After you called her. And when she told me, I didn't believe her. I went and looked in my closet and found the box and turned it over and saw the engraving and I just..." He stopped, rubbed his hand over his face. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, Josh. I didn't say anything. I just let him talk. "I'm not good at this stuff," he said. "Never have been. My old man wasn't either. He worked. He came home. He went to bed. And I told myself I was better because I coached your baseball and went to your school plays. But being there isn't the same as being present. I know that now." He looked at me. His eyes were red. My father, who I had seen cry exactly once in my entire life, at his own mother's funeral, was standing in his driveway on his 35th wedding anniversary with red eyes because of me. "I wore the watch," he said, "after your mother told me. I put it on, and I've been wearing it every day since January. I should have told you that. I should have called you. I just didn't know how to start." I looked down at his wrist, and there it was. The watch. My watch. Leather strap, automatic movement, his initials and retirement year engraved on the back. Slightly scuffed now, which meant he'd been wearing it for real. Not for show. Something cracked open in my chest. Not the concrete feeling from Christmas morning. Something warmer. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. "Dad," I said, "I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to see me." He nodded. Slowly. "I see you, Josh. I should have said that a long time ago. You built that bookshelf." I did. "It's the best gift anyone gave us today. Don't tell your brother." I laughed. A real laugh. And he did too. It was small and awkward, and it lasted about 3 seconds. But it was the most honest moment I'd ever shared with my father. We walked back to the party, and I won't say everything was magically fixed. It wasn't. You don't undo decades of a pattern in one conversation. But it was a start. A real one. Not a scripted apology at a dinner table. Not a let's move past it. An actual, uncomfortable, vulnerable start. I gave them the letter after the party. Mom read it that night. She called me the next morning, and for the first time, she didn't minimize. She didn't deflect. She said, "I read it 3 times, and you're right about all of it. I don't know how we let this happen, but I'm sorry, Josh. Really sorry." I said, "Thank you, Mom. That means a lot." She asked about Qley. She asked about the woodworking. She asked about my job. Real questions, not checkbox questions. And when I told her about the promotion and the compliment from Harlan, she said, "Honey, that's incredible." And the thing is, I believe she had no idea, because she'd never asked. Over the next few months, things changed slowly. Dad started calling me. Not every week, but regularly. Sometimes just to talk about nothing. He asked about my projects, about Qley. One Saturday, he drove out to Deacon's workshop and spent the afternoon watching me build floating shelves. He didn't say much, just sat on a stool and handed me clamps when I needed them. Deacon later told me, "That man looked at you like you hung the moon, son. He just doesn't have the words for it yet." Sutton and I had a real conversation too. He admitted he'd never thought about how different our experiences were growing up. "I just assumed we had the same childhood," he said. To his credit, he listened. After that, he made more effort. Not performative stuff. Just calling to check in, inviting me and Qley to things. Treating me like a brother, not an afterthought. Qley and I moved in together in September. Riggins approved of her immediately, which mattered to me more than I expected. I'm 30 now. I've got a job I'm proud of, a woman who sees me without me having to perform, friends who show up, and a family that's learning to do the same. My parents aren't perfect. They never will be. But they're trying, and for the first time, I believe the effort is real. The watch sits in a glass case on Dad's nightstand now. Mom told me he takes it off every night and puts it there, and every morning he puts it back on. She said he told her once, "That boy put more thought into one gift than I put into 20 years of conversations with him." I'm not making that mistake again. I don't tell you that to brag. I tell you that because sometimes the people who fail you the hardest are also the ones who are capable of changing, if you're brave enough to tell them the truth and patient enough to let them sit with it. That Christmas morning, when I opened that box and saw my own gift staring back at me, I thought it was the worst moment of my life. Turns out, it was the beginning of the best chapter. So yeah, that's my story. I'm Josh, I'm 30, I build furniture on weekends. I'm in love with a woman named Qley, and my dad wears my watch every single day. I think that says everything.